Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hey, great day to everyone, and hopefully everyone enjoyed a fantastic, happy Independence Day. It's not the 4th of July. 4th of July is just a date on the calendar. It was our 242nd American Independence Day, and it's very important that we recognize that and realize that. And that's some of the things that we're going to talk about. How do we maintain our independence? We have two great gentlemen here with me, Colonel Alan West, filling in for Kirby Anderson, who is just taking a little breather. You know, every now and then you need to go over to the bench and get a little Gatorade or what have you, and I'm sure that's what Kirby is doing. So stay hydrated out there, Kirby. Get plenty of Gatorade in you. But we've got Kelly Shackelford from First Liberty, one of the most brilliant legal minds out there. And I tell you, the things that Kelly is doing is truly about honoring the founding documents of this great nation, ensuring we have individual liberty and freedom. And we also have Buddy Mathews as well. And when you talk about economic freedom, economic liberty, and the means by which we can continue to enjoy equality of opportunity in America, not equality of outcomes, this is one of the great minds we have here in the Dallas Metroplex area. There's been someone that's been pretty much a good little mentor for me since I moved here back in 2015. But first, before I get started with Kelly and Buddy, I want to share something with you, because if you were paying attention to the news, you saw how some people on the progressive socialist left side decided to enjoy Independence Day by climbing on the Statue of Liberty and hanging a sign called "Abolish the ICE," the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Well, let me tell you something about abolishing ICE. This was just released yesterday from the White House press office. Illegal immigrants arrested by ICE represented 48,000 assault offenses in 2017, 5,000 sexual assault offenses, 2,000 kidnapping offenses, 1,800 homicides, 76,000 major drug crime offenses. The ICE Homeland Security Investigations Unit had 4,818 gang arrests in 2017. They apprehended 980,000 pounds of narcotics, 2,370 pounds of fentanyl, 6,967 pounds of heroin were seized. And the left wants to abolish these guys that are out there protecting us so that we can continue to enjoy our Independence Day. I've got to tell you, if they continue down this path, it's going to be a bloodbath for them in November. So you guys, Maxine Waters, all you, please keep saying the same thing. Keep out there climbing the Statue of Liberty and upsetting Americans, 4,300 some odd Americans who waited to get an opportunity to go to see the Statue of Liberty on Independence Day, and they had to leave because of someone wanted to abolish the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency that are out there doing an incredible job for us. Now, speaking of a law enforcement agency, we got some big things going to be happening on Monday. And I got to tell you, leave it up to the great reality TV master, President Donald J. Trump, to say, we're going to announce this thing Monday night. So the entire world is going to be tuned in to see what happens with his second Supreme Court Justice nominee. And Kelly, you are in on the development of this list that I understand that he is, picking and choosing these individuals from. And right now, it seems that we're down to Brett Kavanaugh, 53 years of age, D.C. Circuit Court; Raymond Kethridge, 51 years of age; Amy Coney Barrett, 46 years of age, 7th Circuit Court; And I think there's a dark horse out there by the name of Senator Mike Lee. So what are your insights into this thing? Because you've been dealing with this from inception.
Well, there's another one another name you'd throw in there, which would be Thomas Hardiman. He was the second choice last time when Gorsuch was taken. But most people think it's pretty well known right now that the three top choices are Kavanaugh, Kethledge, and Amy Coney Barrett. And what's interesting is, and I'm not spilling any beans here because this is all public, but a lot of people, you haven't been paying close attention, you probably don't know. So what is the difference between these people? Well, with Kavanaugh, you have a guy who's written about 300 opinions, who's been on the court for 15 years. He's on the court in Washington, D.C. Now, some people criticize, right? He's a Washington, D.C. guy. Before that, he was in the Bush administration. He was actually worked with Ken Starr when they did the Clinton investigations, et cetera. He has written a lot of opinions. I would say that the one that has gotten him some criticism from the base, that is getting some controversy right now especially, is his Obamacare opinion. He threw the case out saying, he would have, he was in a dissent, saying they don't have jurisdiction. But the argument he made for that was that because it was a tax. And later, Chief Justice Roberts would take that argument and use it on the merits and actually, upset a lot of conservatives. So some people don't.
That was the vote that decided it.
It did.
So some people criticize him, but I think the other cases that he's being criticized for, it's not that he is ever being criticized for coming to the wrong, on the wrong side. It's that the arguments against him are he should have gone further. And so what he really is, he the best word to a lot of people is he's a judicial minimalist, which is a very conservative thing. It's like you as a judge shouldn't be reaching for more than you have to decide the case. So some people think, well, is he really what we want? And so there's people criticizing him. Kethledge is like Kavanaugh. And let me say with Kavanaugh, almost 20 years ago, he donated his time on a religious liberty case with myself and Jay Sekulow that was going to the Supreme Court. So he's a guy Kavanaugh, who has been involved for years, who's in the Bush administration, et cetera. So these are all good people. Kethledge also clerked for Justice Kennedy, just like Kavanaugh did. Only Kethledge doesn't have the record that Kavanaugh does. You can't read all these opinions where he's written, like the Heller 2 case where Kavanaugh read a great opinion on the Second Amendment. You're just not finding a lot of that for Kethledge. He just doesn't have that record where you can see. People are confident with him. People who are, good people, Chuck Cooper and the current Solicitor General of the United States, Noel Francisco, they're very good conservative people. But everybody's looking at him going, we're not sure what we're getting there. And so that's the beat against him. Amy Coney Barrett, everybody knows what we're getting. And so her downside is they're scared. They're scared that if she's picked, she won't get through because she is strong, she's solid, and she's a person of faith, and they're scared that she's going to come under attack and won't make it through. So it's different attacks against each one of them. All would be good in certain ways, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about Amy Barrett, and we saw the almost Sanhedrin-like interrogation she went through from Dianne Feinstein, when you look at the politics of it, that could play in the right hands because you're alienating an incredible amount of people. I mean, who is going to go after a woman that has 7 kids? She's very accomplished, and Catholic. Boy, right. I mean, you could really upset a lot of apple carts. But I think it's important that, you do get this thing right. But if you're going to do it ahead of the midterm elections, there are political ramifications, there are political considerations. And we'll come back from the break. We'll talk about some of those political considerations. And then also, Merrill, we can talk about, buddy, I'm thinking that's better. We can talk about, the economic effects of the Supreme Court, judicial activism and things of that nature. Colonel Alan West guest hosting here for Kirby, along with Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Will robots destroy jobs and put all of us in the unemployment lines? Some futurists seem to be predicting this scenario. Jay Richards disagrees. He says it is an old argument that is new again. He is the author of the book, The Human Advantage, The Future of American Work in an Age of Smart Machines. One report predicts that the future of robots appears to be a dystopian march to rising inequality, falling wages, and higher unemployment. A number of books warn of the rise of robots and even suggest that this new technology will lead to the death of capitalism. Jay Richards acknowledges that we have a coming disruption that could be as abrupt as the Industrial Revolution. But looking back, we can see that previous revolutions didn't lead to the end of employment. They often provided new jobs without the boredom and danger of the past. And if it is true that technology leads to permanent unemployment of the masses, the history of the last few centuries would be a history of joblessness. That is not true, but some politicians accept the faulty premise that jobs will be scarce, therefore have proposed the idea of a universal basic income that would essentially put millions more on welfare. One obvious problem would be money. The government is going broke right now with various entitlement programs. Expanding that is economically unrealistic. And do we really want to pay millions more in this country not to do work? The lesson to government and education is to stop training kids to do jobs that robots will be doing in a few years. The lesson for parents and their children is to focus on developing skills a robot would never take away from you. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome back. Colonel Alan West here, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson, here with Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews. We were talking about the SCOTUS picks that we have out there. We have these top three names: Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethledge, Amy Coney Barrett. We didn't talk a lot about Senator Mike Lee, although his name's been bubbled up there, and he got invited over to the White House for an interview. But off camera, we were talking a lot about the politics, the optics of this. And, Merrill, what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know the candidates very well, certainly not like Kelly does, but just my own impression from having seen the interviews. I like Amy. I think the notion of the president nominating a woman is beneficial, especially in the Me Too world where Democrats try to say Republicans have a war on women. And then third, since the two Republican swing votes on this in the Senate, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Senator Collins from Maine, it seems to me to be a good nod towards them and harder for them to oppose them if it's a woman. So I think there's a lot of good politics behind nominating a woman in this.
Yeah, and you also have two female Democrat senators that are up, Claire McCaskill in Missouri and Heidi Heitkamp up in North Dakota. So, again, can you just imagine someone standing up there and berating, Miss Barrett in front of the entire world? And how does that play? That'd be a terrible optic for the left to try to say that, we're the party that believes in women and we're the party that believes in smashing that glass ceiling and everything like that. Oh, but if only it benefits us, with Sotomayor or with Elena Kagan. who also did not have a background very
No.
long in the circuit court world. I
No.
mean, she was just a solicitor general. So this whole thing about experience, that's thrown out too.
Oh, Amy Coney Barrett has a lot more experience than Elena Kagan did. Amy Coney Barrett was a law professor at the highest level and has written extensively about what is a proper judicial interpretation. I mean, in some ways, she tells you more about what she's going to do than people who have issued lots of opinions, because she's got 4 different law review articles laying out judicial interpretation, how you're to do it. And so I think she's actually got a pretty clear roadmap of where she's going to go, which I think makes liberals a little more concerned, because I think she's considered one of Scalia's favorites. She clerked for Scalia, and she was considered one of his favorites. That tells you a lot right there.
And that tells you that this would be a perfect person to come in and replace someone like a strict constitutionalist that Antonin Scalia was. Now, we've got a lot of cases that are going to be bubbling up because, as you know, part of the tax cut law, but they repealed the individual mandate. Mm-hmm. And, that was the whole basis of Chief Justice Roberts saying that Obamacare is a tax, and he gave this incredible taxing authority over to the government. So, this is going to be a critical thing when we look at possibly within the next 2 to 3 years, we could hear another Supreme Court case about Obamacare.
We could hear another one because several states have challenged the law now because the mandate's gone. The tax doesn't play the role that it had before. Mm-hmm. So that is out there, but it goes to the impact, the economic impact of the court. Had the Chief Justice decided not to go with that direction, think how many billions of dollars it would have saved American consumers, mm-hmm. the government, and taxpayers. And in addition, it would have, Obamacare has largely destroyed the health insurance market. Mm-hmm. Premiums are significantly higher. A lot of us, including my wife, was in an individual policy, Blue Cross policy. She had those policies canceled 3 years in a row and finally had to go to one of the Christian sharing ministries because there wasn't really anything available in Dallas where she could go see her doctor who's been here practicing for 40 years.
Isn't that incredible?
It's amazing. And that was because Blue Cross in Texas sent out a note saying, we lost $400 million on Obamacare policies in Texas alone in 1 year. And so we're changing what we're having to do there. So it has been a huge disruption to the marketplace. And it just goes to show that the Supreme Court is not minor decisions or even major decisions have to do with individuals. It has a huge economic impact, or can.
No, without a doubt. And for what I've been reading, we're looking at another 13 to 15% premium increases coming this October. And even though we have, these good job numbers, which we'll talk about in the next segment, that still is going to have an incredible economic impact on people that are out there. Now, Kelly, without a doubt, we are seeing the left go absolutely apoplectic.
Yes.
I have never heard anyone say that we need to have a Senate judiciary hearing to look into why Justice Kennedy is retiring. The guy wants to enjoy his life.
He's 82 or 3?
Yeah, he wants to fly fish or whatever. But they're really concerned because, as I see it, the premise of the left has always been about control of the courts, control of schools, control of the media. And they are afraid about maybe you could see a President Trump in his tenure replacing 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices.
Absolutely.
And this would put all of a sudden you have a 7-2 conservative court. Think about some of the recent decisions last week with the labor unions, with the terrorist watch list countries. What are we looking at, with a Supreme Court, let's say, going out for the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, I think the president's going to get more opportunities after this one. And I really think where our court is going is it's going to become less relevant, which is a great thing, because I think as we get more of these, because you look at his list, all the people on the list would tell you that they have the philosophy that they are there to be, I would say, a humble judge, a judge that's like, I'm not here to legislate. I'm not here to put my morality on you. That's what legislators do. And if you don't like them, you throw them out and you replace them. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with a justice. So what the justices are supposed to do is say, what does the law say? What was the original meaning of this when it was written? And if somebody, you get that and you say that's how we apply this, and for instance, if it's not in the Constitution, you don't make it up. Mm-hmm. And if it's there, you apply it exactly like it's written. That's kind of simple. And so it's always funny, the discussion with liberal conservative judges. Mm-hmm. They think it's like a political game, the general public.
It shouldn't be.
They don't understand. No. Liberal justice means they want to get to their liberal conclusion, and then they figure out what they need to say in the opinion, whereas the conservatives, like, it's not about the result. It's about their approach, which is going to be restraining themselves and saying, it doesn't matter what I believe or what I want. It's my job to simply follow what the law says and to apply that.
Kelly, it's an interesting point because they're saying now with Kennedy leaving, the Chief Justice John Roberts becomes the swing vote. Mm-hmm. I never hear of a liberal swing vote. It's always a conservative swing vote.
It is.
And so that's because I assume, going to your point, that conservatives, sometimes the law applies here. Whether you or I agree with them, they feel like the law applies here, so they have to do that. So it always seems to be the conservatives who become the swing votes and never a liberal.
You know what is interesting? I read some quotes. 3 Democrat senators, Chuck Schumer, I think it was Cory Booker, and Elizabeth Warren. And they are talking about how their concern about the shifting of this Supreme Court is that it will get in the way of their progressive agenda. I mean, they are outright saying they have no concern about the Constitution. They don't want people up there interpreting the Constitution that it gets in the way of their agenda. And so, therefore, let's talk about the boogeyman that they're using. And it's all about Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it so, funny that they say, well, once you have this precedent established, you can't go back and argue against it. Well, good thing that they got rid of that Dred Scott decision, or else I might not be sitting here with you guys. But do you think there's a real concern, a valid concern, that at some point we're going to go back and look at Roe v. Wade, which I will tell you, 17 to 18 million black babies killed since 1973. I kind of think you should look at it.
Well, do I think that if, the president has a few more choices, which I think he's going to in the future, that we're going to eventually see that happen? I do think that's going to be eventually overturned because it's wrong. It's just not, it's not in the Constitution, right? Mm-hmm. And that means it'll go to the states. But the idea that, with this nominee, guess how many justices currently on the court have said they would overturn Roe v. Wade? One. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the idea that we get confirmed as next justice, they're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I think that's hysteria, and that's kind of a scare tactic to try to do whatever they can. But look, there's a lot of issues up there. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to start to have things returned to the people.
Yeah,
because the Constitution only covers certain things, and in those things it applies. But if it doesn't apply, your more conservative judges are going to say, you know what, this is not in the Constitution. Let's leave that to the people to decide.
Okay, I'm putting you on the spot. Who you picking?
Well, if I had to pick, I would guess he's going to choose Kavanaugh. But I don't think anybody knows. I've talked to a lot of people, and nobody knows. They don't think the president knows right now.
He's unpredictable.
He is.
All right, we'll be back right after this break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the economy. We're going to talk about the jobs numbers. We're going to talk about some of these other things.
For a generation, listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers, defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Bottom of the hour, Colonel Alan Weston here, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson, joined by Kelly Shackelford and also Buddy Mathews. And we started out talking about the SCOTUS pick, that selection, which will happen prime time Monday evening. So check out the primetime president that we have here. But now let's switch over to something. You know, we had an incredible jobs report that came out this morning for the month of June, but yet we still see some interesting things happening in the markets or whatever, because also today, because last night at midnight, these tariffs went into effect against China, and China came back out and they threw their spitball back at us. So we got that going back and forth. So we want to talk to Buddy Mathews about the strength of the economy and where we're going, because this jobs report, 213,000 jobs created. The unemployment rate, though, went from 3.8 to 4%. But yes, over 600,000 people go back into the job market. And, of course, that's a good thing. You want that. Manufacturing jobs increased by 36,000, and we also had wage increase. So tell us, how do you see this economy right now? Is it on the right glide path without a doubt? And when you hear the Democrats talk about they're going to repeal the tax cut law, good luck with that, fellas.
The economy is definitely on the right glide path, doing very well, with a caveat, and that is, does the trade kerfuffle right now develop into a full-fledged trade war? And that, I think, is the concern and what the market is worried about right now. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down for the year right now. S&P 500 and NASDAQ are both up some, but the market is concerned about this, and I think rightly so. We'll see what happens. You know, you mentioned on the jobs report was good. It's been several months of good, strong economic growth. Democrats are saying that was all because of Obama. During Obama years, they said the reason it wasn't doing it better because of Bush. Yeah. So the Bush economy has all of a sudden become the Obama economy, and they're saying it's the driving force behind it. But as you mentioned, the labor force participation rate, that's the number of people who are out there who are in the workforce, that has ticked up. That's good. During the 2000s, it had this drop, apart from the recessions, but also it was just more and more people were not working. That has been changing over the past few years, so that is very good. We need workers. We've got unfilled jobs out there where employers cannot find workers who can come in and take the job. So we need workers. We need people moving back into the workforce. My one caveat is, did that increase in the unemployment rate from 3.8 to 4%, did some companies that are now beginning to lay off because of the tariffs that are coming in, does that play somewhat of a role in there? And my guess is it plays at least a small role, if not, I don't think it'd be a big role yet. But I'm just seeing too many stories of companies out there saying we had to lay off 200, we had to lay off 50, we had to lay off 100, simply because their markets are beginning to decline because of the tariffs.
Well, you know, we've got the story of Harley Davidson. You know, I'm a big motorcycle rider. Now Harley Davidson is looking at moving, production facilities over there into Europe, because that's one of their big markets, and they don't want to have to deal with increased tariffs, getting hit against them. I also saw a nail company. Yes. Because of, the thing on steel. And so
I can give you an example here in Dallas. A friend who is managing a school district, they're building a new school. He got a call a couple of months ago, and he said the rebar for building the new school was going to cost him $100,000 more because of the steel tariffs. That was, they're already in the contract to do that, so they got to get the steel in. It has an impact on cost out there, and we just don't know. The hope is that this is President Trump playing rough in an effort to try to get the deal that he feels like he needs. Yes. And so we're hoping that's what's going to happen, that eventually you're going to have this thing settle down.
What is, this is one of the things I'm not an economist, and so, Buddy, this is a great question. Love you to answer, which is, obviously tariffs are normally bad, all the way around, and those who are for the free market. But the problem is, we don't have a free market when we have these unfair trade situations where they're putting tariffs on our goods and et cetera. And so how do you force sort of a free market when the other side is not willing to go by the free market. Is what Trump's doing maybe the way to do that, to kind of hit them with some things and then kind of work out an agreement, or is this crazy and it's just going to cause a lot of harm?
It's a very good point. The World Trade Organization actually ranks the countries based upon their tariffs. So you can go to WTO and you can find out where the tariffs are. President Trump is right.
Oh, yeah.
All of our major trading partners have higher tariffs on us than we do on them. Mm-hmm. So under the WTO listing, the way they do this sort of composite, we get about a 3.5. Canada's over 4. Mexico's over 7. The European Union 5.16. Mm-hmm. China nearly 10 in this ranking here in the pairs. Even Japan's over us. South Korea, which is a major trading partner, nearly 14. So the president is right. I don't think he's made that case to the public. He says, well, Canada's charging us a whole lot more on dairy products, so we're going to raise our tariffs. I think the public gets lost in the notion that the president is right. The other countries impose stiffer tariffs on us than we do on them. And so the question is, how do you get, ideally, you get them to reduce theirs.
Right.
We reduce ours.
Absolutely.
They like to get down to zero.
And that's the equitable trade that he's talking about. And I think sometimes that if you don't break it down like you have on that chart and just allow people to see those simple numbers, they get lost in the weeds. And the other thing we have to understand is that, this is the 100th year anniversary of the final year of World War I. And, my dad served in World War II. And I did a stint over there in Europe, and my father-in-law did a stint in Europe. And, my nephew is – why is it that the Europeans are putting tariffs on us, the people who have, given our bloody, treasure to them so that they can enjoy this economic growth and viability that they have? All
of this has to do with internal politics. From the various organizations within and industries within the countries that have in Japan, it's rice. The rice growers are a huge force there. And incidentally, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which the president abandoned, Japan was dramatically cutting its tariffs on rice. So that the markets could open up some. But the president points out that the European Union tends to have about a 10% tariff on our cars going in. Mm-hmm. We have a 2.5% tariff on their cars coming in, but we have a 25% tariff on light trucks coming in. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why some of the companies have been moving to SUVs and crossovers and so forth is to try to get around that tariff that we have on light trucks, which was put in place years ago, but it's still there. So we have some that we should be reducing. They have more that they should be reducing, but I don't think most people really understand it. And the president's point, which was initiated by Larry Kudlow, his economic advisor, said, we make a suggestion at the G7 meeting that we go to zero tariffs. Yeah. And the president made that suggestion. Nobody took him seriously. I can tell you that inside the White House, there are some people who are trying to get that to be a serious proposal that the president will come out and say, this is where we need to go, at least among the G7. I thought that was one of the best suggestions he had made.
Absolutely. It makes complete sense. Now, let me ask you this. You brought up the World Trade Organization. Is this a viable organization, or is it just another one of those do-nothing global politic type of organizations? Because when you look at the theft of intellectual property that China's doing, when you look at the forced technology transfers, for companies that want to go into that market, they're getting away with it.
Yes, they are. And I think I'd go back to the history. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, back from right after World War II was a very important thing to to get countries to reduce their tariffs. It turned in the WTO in the 90s. Arguably, it had a role. I think most people feel like the WTO is just not really effective anymore, almost like the UN.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Other countries think very highly of it, but it's just not terribly effective anymore. And the president is giving the WTO a hard time now.
Well, he should be, because if we are supposedly trusting this organization to be the umpire, to call the balls and call the strikes, but yet they're not doing it. And that has to be the frustration.
We've challenged a number of countries' tariffs, and we have won on the large majority of those cases. But the president isn't a conventional president in the way he wants to try to negotiate these things. And whether or not that's good or bad on tariffs, I don't know. But it's at least right now, it has got a lot of people nervous, because if you have jobs being lost and the stock market going down and so forth, that could affect the election in November.
Well, one of the things I think that's a setback or, not to our credit, we are a fast food mentality country. And these other countries believe that they can outlast us.
That's right.
And so when we just can't just take this little short-term thing, they say, see, we can just hold them out.
China has always had a long game view of things for centuries. And so they're willing to play this out over time. We can't. Well, you get people kicked out of office if you don't do this right.
Yeah, because everything here is based on election cycles. It's not long-term vision. Okay, last quick question. Is our economy strong enough to go through this little tariff spit?
I think so.
Okay. But Colonel Allen West will be back, and we're going to talk about universal wage increases. Or what is that? See you in a little while.
There's a welcome shift away from the social engineering in the military that drains readiness programs. The U.S. Army released an official memo stating that transgender training is complete across the total Army. For 2 years, the Army has been conducting mandatory transgender integration training. 2 Obama-era directives necessitated this. One changed military policy as of July 1, 2016, so that an individual could no longer be discharged for being transgender. On July 1, 2017, the military services were scheduled to begin allowing transgender individuals to join the armed forces. The Army spent time and money preparing leaders to deal with biological men being allowed in women's showers, gender transition, and even male pregnancies. Family Research Council points out that's time our military can never get back. The Trump administration looked at these readiness issues and the massive price tag for taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries and non-deployability of transgender troops. Based on research presented to him by several members of Congress, Secretary of Defense James Mattis recommended the Obama policy be reversed. The military returned to the pre-2016 policy in which transgender individuals who suffer from gender dysphoria are prohibited from serving in the military. Gender dysphoria is defined as a conflict between an individual's biological gender and the gender with which they identify. The Pentagon concluded that these individuals, quote, experience significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. There is a carve-out in the policy for transgenders to serve, provided they don't suffer from gender dysphoria, have been stable in their gender for 36 months, and meet requirements for deployability. The Army's memo states its training shift is designed to refocus on soldiers' ability to fight in combat. FRC's Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin has insisted all along the military is a fighting force, not a gender clinic. The new policy faces lawsuits, but it must stand. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Colonel Allen West back here with you, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson, who's out taking a knee, but in a good way, okay? I don't think he took a knee on Independence Day. But I'm here with Kelly Shackelford of First Liberty and also the great Buddy Mathews, economist and healthcare economist extraordinaire. And we were talking about the economy. We were talking about a jobs report. We're talking about the tariffs and everything of this nature. You know, there's a lot of talk going on now about this socialist wave that is going across America. Well, one of the, really quirky ideas out there is this thing about a universal basic income. I mean, Cory Booker, who without a doubt is going to be running for president in 2020, is embracing this, and he's looking to introduce legislation in the Senate. And I find it interesting because we just came off Independence Day, buddy. And it talks about the inalienable rights from our Creator being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have these folks from the left that believe that they can guarantee happiness. They can guarantee a federal job. So
they're trying to eliminate poverty and to reduce income inequality. And so the notion is everybody in the country, or if you're doing it at a state level, everybody in the state gets a check from the government. The same amount for everybody.
Does that include LeBron James?
Absolutely.
Okay.
LeBron James, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates would all get the same check. And they usually vary it around somewhere around $1,000 a month is sort of the talking point there. A few countries have tried demonstration projects. A few cities in California are trying demonstration projects with this, being backed by rich tech individuals who think this is a good idea, so they're putting some money towards this. But it's limited, and it's usually not as much as $1,000. It's usually more of around $500-600. Though one is looking at around $1,000 a month. But we'll see what happens to it. But the Democratic Party of California has adopted this as part of their platform. Several, as you point out, presidential hopefuls, Cory Booker and others, are flirting with the idea. So it would not surprise me if the Democratic platform for president in 2020 has universal basic income as one of its planks.
What is it that they don't understand that in 242 years, what built this great nation, the innovation, the ingenuity, the investment of the individual did not come from government largesse. And so if you are saying that they want to just come down and give people money, we're going to create a job and we're going to pay them this $15. Where do you think you get the money from?
Well, usually they say you get it from wealthy people. However, as I've pointed out, and as the head of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities has pointed out, a very liberal group, if you go with $10,000 a year as a universal basic income, so that's a little less than $1,000 a month, you're costing the government more than $3 trillion a year. Now, federal revenues in 2018 for the federal government is about $3.4 trillion. So you're, in essence, taking virtually every dollar that the federal government gets in and handing it out in basic income. Mm-hmm. And that means you're not funding defense. That means you're not funding the judiciary. You're not funding education. You're not funding any of
the debt skyrockets because you got to go out and you got to buy from someone. And think about this. We just had a $1.3 trillion omnibus spending bill. So if they go down the path of this universal basic income, then, forget a budget. But what is so interesting to me, Kelly, because you've been here in North Texas for a great amount of time, there are a lot of California license plates running around here in North Texas. I mean, I've noticed that in the 4 years I've been here. So if you're fleeing a place where these policies are failing, why would you want to bring it to a place where the antithesis is succeeding?
Yeah, it's amazing. These folks move in because of the low taxes, the environment, all these different things, and then they immediately want to bring their, the things that destroyed their own state and why they're leaving. It's incredible. I mean, look, to me, socialism, about the most basic, part of socialism is the government guaranteeing you, a paycheck. And so that's all this is. It's just a form of socialism. Mm-hmm. And I just, the danger is our younger people are not getting an education on this. So mm-hmm. many of them, think socialism is cool. And you got the Bernie and all these things. Now you got these people running for office who are just extreme socialists and getting elected. I hope this election cycle is going to be an opportunity to really educate people about what socialism is, mm-hmm. about where it leads, about why our country is the greatest country on the face of the earth, and the freedoms that we have. But that's going to depend upon a lot of these candidates who are running against these people doing a good job. I hope somebody's training them well and that they're doing a good job, because they've got to do this in a way where the general public can understand what they're saying.
Well, it's all about messaging. And, Margaret Thatcher put it very well. Socialism works very well until you run out of other people's money.
That's right.
And it destroys initiative. It destroys determination. It destroys the will. And so when you look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that, let's be honest, folks, only 30,000 people showed up to vote in that primary. I mean, I think it's like 20%. So there's not this big, hoopla. But the fact that she's standing up free college, free wages, all of these things, and she, without a doubt, will be a representative in the House, in the United States House coming up soon. How is it that we're going to be able to get out there and not confuse people with the numbers, buddy, but just basically explain to them wealth redistribution doesn't work. Creating the welfare nanny state, it doesn't work. Nationalizing production doesn't work. And if you think it does work, we got a great case study right now called Venezuela.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you do this. I just came back from a week in Brooklyn. So she was from Bronx and Queens.
Yeah.
Brooklyn looks like it's the same thing. I mean, you have the rainbow flags out over the place. You have anti-Trump messages everywhere around. You have Black Lives Matter and rainbow flags out in front of old established churches and so forth. And you get the impression this isn't America here. It's a version of sort of a increasingly left version of what's happening in America. But fortunately, you've got all that area in between New York City and San Francisco that has some sense and understands exactly what you're saying and is so far been able to keep us from getting too far off the track.
Well, it's interesting because you just brought up a great point. You said Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn. Basically what you're talking about, all the major urban centers in the United States of America. But where do you see the greatest amount of the failure? And that was the miracle, I think, of the 2016 election cycle, because let's take a state like Pennsylvania. All of a sudden, folks in between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia came out and said, this is not what we want. And, the founding fathers were brilliant in that they did not want major population centers to dominate the national electoral scene. So it is a matter of education, but how do we get the basic study of economics, back into our schools?
I don't know how you do that because so many of the professors in college teach leftist economics. It becomes it's a real challenge because you're fighting the education system from the beginning all the way up, and that's not meant to criticize all public schools. There's good public schools out there, but they especially when they get into college, the left controls that, and that's when people, for lack of a better term, get radicalized.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I think it's so important. I think there's a real opportunity in the elections. I mean, some of these seats, like you say, are they're going to be won by the socialists who won the primaries. But some of these races, there's going to be races between a Republican and a Democrat who ran as a socialist. And I hope that they do a good job of coming up with messaging where people can begin to understand what socialism is and why it's so destructive. And because our young people especially need a real education, or, they're going to try to take the country in a really bad direction.
Just to add a note, Ocasio-Cortez has a degree in economics.
From Boston University.
Yes.
That tells you something, doesn't it, folks? All right, Colonel Alan West will be right back with Kelly and Buddy, and we're going to talk more about this socialist movement in America.
In an age of fake news, getting good information is vital. Point of View works to bring you that each and every day. But as Diane in Arkansas illustrates, passing that information along, educating others, is something you can help with. Diane is a college professor. She influences the next generation, and she wrote, "Thank you for your informative letter. I used some of your quotes when I was teaching the Declaration of Independence in my literature class." Diane, like so many, hopefully like you, is taking what she received from Point of View in letters, online, through our app, on the air, and rebuilding truth in this post-truth culture. All of that takes a team. Join the truth team at Point of View. Find out how you can help at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. Show your commitment. Make a difference today, right now. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Colonel Alan West here. We're in our second hour for Point of View Radio. I'm joined by Kelly Shackelford, the incredible President and CEO of First Liberty, and also Buddy Mathews, an extraordinary economic mind and also healthcare economist. And we're just having a great conversation about so many things that are going on. We'd like to invite you to be part of that conversation at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. I want to once again remind people about why we need to have the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, because the White House released yesterday that illegal immigrants arrested by ICE were responsible for 48,000 assault offenses in 2017, 5,000 being sexual assault offenses, 2,000 kidnapping offenses, 1,800 homicide offenses, 76,000 major drug crime offenses. The ICE Homeland Security Investigations Unit arrested 4,818 gang members in 2017. They apprehended 980,000 pounds of narcotics, 2,370 pounds of fentanyl, and 6,967 pounds of heroin, all seized by the organization that certain people on the left want to abolish. Just imagine what would happen if 980,000 pounds of narcotics were still out there on the street, 2,370 pounds of fentanyl, and we talk about we want to end this opioid crisis. So I think we need to keep ICE. There are young men and young women that are doing their absolute best to serve and protect each and every one of us. Now, we talked about the SCOTUS picks that are out there before us, and we have someone that has been there on the ground from the development of this list that the president has been picking and choosing individuals from, and that's Kelly Shackelford. And Kelly, you want to give us a real quick, again, a summary of how you see these SCOTUS picks?
Yeah, the general consensus is of the top four. There's Brett Kavanaugh, Raymond Kethledge, Amy Coney Barrett, and Thomas Hardiman. What's considered the top three over the last 24 hours is Kavanaugh, Kethledge, and Barrett. Mm-hmm. And the general, Barrett was a law professor at Notre Dame. She is Catholic. She was attacked for her faith. I know Feinstein famously said, the dogma lives loudly within you, which was evidently a bad thing.
She's a cult and part of a cult too.
Yeah,
right?
because she's a part of a praise and worship group, so she's got 7 children and 2 adopted children. Great story, great legal mind. Clerk for Justice Scalia, considered one of his favorites, has written really more than any of them on judicial philosophy and how judges are supposed to interpret the law. So you know a lot more about her than we really do sometimes about people who've issued opinions, because we know exactly her approach. And so here's what I would say: she is somewhat of a favorite of the base and the religious conservatives more. Kavanaugh is a guy who's had 15 years on the D.C. Federal Court of Appeals. He was in the Bush administration. He was with Ken Starr in the Clinton investigations, et cetera. He has had a lot of great opinions on the Second Amendment, on the limited government, a lot of things that people would like. I guess I'd mention the people who say, well, Amy Coney Barrett, I don't know, is because they think she's so strong she won't get through. That's the people who say don't pick her out of the three. Mm-hmm. The people who are going after Kavanaugh are typically because, number one, he's got an Obamacare opinion that some of them were uncomfortable with. He on a jurisdictional argument said that it was a tax, and therefore they didn't have jurisdiction to even hear the case. But the problem with that, some people said, is that whole idea that it was a tax ended up later being what Roberts used in the merits. And so people didn't like that. And there's some other opinions where they felt like he should have been stronger. He ruled the right way in those. They didn't criticize him, but they felt like he should be more aggressive. And he's more of a real conservative judicial restraint. Don't go further than you should go in the opinion. Mm-hmm. Then the third is Kethledge. Kethledge is also a Kennedy clerk, was a Kennedy clerk, just like Kavanaugh. Kethledge not as much as known about because he just doesn't have as many opinions. Mm-hmm. People feel like he's kind of maybe played the game of not sort of sticking his neck out, which could mean he's ready to get on the court and do great stuff, or it could mean, look out. So there are people that say they'd like to see more record than that. And so they've all got, credentials that are, where they should be more of the conservative jurists, humble, judges who step back, don't put their own morality as the number one thing. Their job is to interpret the law and to let the legislature and the people do that. But they each have things that they're being criticized, and nobody knows what the president is going to do. And that's part of the theater, I guess, for Monday night and the way this president...
get your popcorn.
He does. Whatever president has ever had kind of made this build-up, right? Yeah. It's brilliant, right? Everybody's going to be watching Monday night to see what he does, Kelly, so good for him.
Let me ask you a question. Several years ago, including here on Point of View, we discussed the notion after the Robert Bork fiasco and so forth that maybe they were going to presidents would start moving towards nominees who didn't have much of a paper trail, because that way you had less to attack. But that's certainly not the case among these candidates.
No, that approach was a foolish approach by the Republicans. The Democrats did not do that. Mm-hmm. For instance, they put Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was the head of the ACLU of New York. And they would get them through. And then the Republicans go, wow, we just want to do a paper trail. And you know what? If you're 55 or so years old and there's no paper trail, that you're a conservative, then maybe you're not a conservative. Mm-hmm. And so what tended to happen is they would put people on the court and without the paper trail, and they would surprise them in very bad ways with what they would do. So it kind of ended with the Harriet Miers appointment. When they pulled her back, they said, okay, we'll just go with Alito. He's got a big-time record. He's spoken out against Roe v. Wade, et cetera. And I'll be darned, he got through. Yeah. And they realized, you know what? We just need to get with good, solid, conservative judges who will do their job.
Well, Alexander the Great says, fortune favors the bold. And so often, as you say, buddy, you see the left saying, this is who we're going to put up there, and we dare you to say anything. And most times the Republican side, during the nomination process, they may ask some tough questions, but they're going to vote for them. You see that with Sotomayor, you see that with Hagan, what have you. But then all of a sudden we get so reticent that, what kind of person we're going to put up because, we don't want Chuck or somebody, to ask the tough question. You should just go for it. And I think from a political optics aspect, I think that Amy Barrett, that's who I would like to see up there.
She's definitely a favorite to a lot of people in the base. I would say this for all the Point of View listeners, really, really be praying for God to speak to the president, because this appointment is very important for the next 20, 30 years possibly, and he really needs God's wisdom.
And when we come back, we're going to shift over and talk about our economy. We have the jobs report numbers to come out. We're going to get Buddy's analysis on that.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Will robots destroy jobs and put all of us in the unemployment lines? Some futurists seem to be predicting this scenario. Jay Richards disagrees. He says it is an old argument that is new again. He is the author of the book, The Human Advantage, The Future of American Work in an Age of Smart Machines. One report predicts that the future of robots appears to be a dystopian march to rising inequality, falling wages, and higher unemployment. A number of books warn of the rise of robots and even suggest that this new technology will lead to the death of capitalism. Jay Richards acknowledges that we have a coming disruption that could be as abrupt as the Industrial Revolution. But looking back, we can see that previous revolutions didn't lead to the end of employment. They often provided new jobs without the boredom and danger of the past. And if it is true that technology leads to permanent unemployment of the masses, the history of the last few centuries would be a history of joblessness. That is not true, but some politicians accept the faulty premise that jobs will be scarce, therefore have proposed the idea of a universal basic income that would essentially put millions more on welfare. One obvious problem would be money. The government is going broke right now with various entitlement programs. Expanding that is economically unrealistic. And do we really want to pay millions more in this country not to do work? The lesson to government and education is to stop training kids to do jobs that robots will be doing in a few years. The lesson for parents and their children is to focus on developing skills a robot would never take away from you. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel retired Alan West here, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson. Kelly Shackelford just brought up the issue about praying for the president, wisdom and discernment. If you remember when Solomon was going to be the leader of the Israelite people, and God asked him what could he give him, and he just asked for wisdom and discernment. He didn't ask for any riches or anything like that. And then also God told Joshua to be strong and of good courage. So you can go to a tab there at the Point of View radio website, and it's called Pray for America. And so please, we'd like to know what your prayers are for this great nation, because I think the prayer is still a very powerful force in the evolution of the United States of America. 242 years, we celebrated back on Wednesday. And this is the greatest nation that the world has ever known. And part of being a great nation is having a strong economy. And, this morning we had the June jobs report that came out. And as well, last night we had some terrorists that went into into action against China. And China came back, as I said earlier, they threw another spitball back at us. But, buddy, let's talk about the strength of the economy. Let's talk about what we saw with that jobs report. And can we truly weather this storm? Can we finally stand up and say to some of these other countries, we believe in trade, but right now we don't have fair trade. Mm-hmm. It may be free, but it ain't free for us. And we want to get to that point where we have equitable trade.
We have a very strong economy, even though China has the second largest economy. That's primarily because it has so many people. Mm-hmm. It is, if you do it on a per person basis, it's a very low income. So our economy is the biggest and strongest by far in the world. And so we have the ability to be able to withstand a number of these things. The tariffs they're talking about are relatively small compared to the size of the economy. Having said that, very few people think a tariff war, a trade war, is a good thing to do. And what we want to do, ideally, I think, is get down to a little or no tariffs on anything, and restrictions. It's not just tariffs; it's sometimes restrictions. We're going to limit how many cars you put in here, and then of course you've got a real problem. And I think though Europe is not a problem, Canada is not really a problem. We want to try to get those adjusted. China is something of a problem because of their intellectual property theft and other things going on in China that make it much more difficult. And China is trying to be a rising force in Asia, and eventually he'd like to be the sort of the dominating force of the world. I think that's what's going on in China.
They have that strategic vision called the One Belt, One Road strategy. I think China 2025 or what have you. And they are looking to be a dominant, not just economic power, but a dominant military power.
That's exactly right.
You know, China is building port facilities in East Africa. They are looking to build a naval port facility in Pakistan. And we know that the economic growth that they are seeing, it is not going, as you just point out, to the improvement of the quality of life of your everyday Chinese citizen. You know, they have their first domestically built aircraft carrier. You look at what they have done with those islands that are in the South China Sea, the man-made islands, and something that a lot of people don't understand, but is that area of the South China Sea, you've got 40 to 45% of the sea lane of commerce that transits through that area.
The China learned a lesson back in the 1800s. There was what was called the Opium Wars between Britain and China. And China, having been a society that's been around for 4,000 years, you had a huge mass of land, and they just sort of thought they could win anything. Britain came in with better technology, military technology, and defeated them. It's called the era of humiliation for China. And I think they've they learned a lesson then. If we're going to be a major player on the world, we have to have technology and we have to have military power that's second to none. And you sort of see that moving, but they have always had a long game strategy.
You're right.
Where you go back to Henry Kissinger and others who have to deal with them, they've always said they've got a long game strategy. They don't have to play by the same short-term rules. And you sort of see that in the manipulations that are going on, and they're just gradually moving further and further. You know, and President Xi told Jim Mattis here just last week, he said, we don't want to go out and capture other lands. We just want what was always originally China's. That got me going and looking at the maps of China over the past 2,000 years. And in 1912, when the imperial era ended, they had a lot of land, including Taiwan, of course, and Singapore, and the islands down there in the South China Sea, and they want to get back to that, part of Mongolia and other places.
Well, that's why they are a huge threat, and, you know, there's always been a contention between Vietnam and China and Thailand, Laos, and all the others. 800-351-1212 if you want to call in and join the conversation. But I think the most important thing was that China realized that the collapse of the Soviet Union was not a military collapse. It was an economic collapse. Right. And, of course, militarily, we forced that because they just could not keep up with us, you know, with our developing military technologies and what have you. But China realized, first and foremost, if you're going to get out there and compete, you got to be able to compete economically. And you have to insert yourself into the global, economic environment.
Which is what Deng Xiaoping did after the death of Mao. He came in and said, we're going to open up the economy some, and it has worked for them so far. They've made steady progress in that economic opening. It's always a struggle because you've got the communist ideology that sort of drives it. You've got a long time, millennial view of the notion that you have a strong power at the top with lots of bureaucrats out there. They used to call them the mandarins that were sort of guided each of the cities. But you also have an attempt to try to become a freer economy, and we don't know how that works. I'm not entirely sure it does, but we'll see.
Well, that's why I think that anytime Kim Jong-un is talking, that's the Chinese talking.
Yeah.
When they, he says, well, can you suspend some of these military exercises you're having and readiness exercises? That's Xi Jinping talking. That's not Kim Jong-un talking. Now, when you look at it from a religious freedom, that perspective, can we ever get to the point where, Christianity can cause China to change this way?
Well, sure. That's why they're so scared of it. That's why it's the underground church. Because Christianity leads to freedom, and because God is the author of freedom, and so they They don't want that, and that's why our brothers and sisters in China go through what they go through. Here's the interesting thing to me is, despite the tariff wars or whatever you want to call it right now, the head, I'm showing you the head picture here on Drudge, which is record 155,576,576,000 employed. So we, as of today, we have a record number of people that have ever been employed in the United States. So despite sort of some of this thing that's going on right now, something good is really happening. And I think, I know, what Trump is trying to do is, we wish everybody just get rid of their tariffs. But if some people think, well, I'll just hit you with tariffs and then you'll not hit me with tariffs, and so that'll just be to my advantage, Trump's trying to see if he can't whack people back and then get them to some sort of an agreement that where we have more, at least, of a free economy.
Well, he's finally standing up for the American economy, which, let's be honest, as Buddy brought up previously, we have a lot of these nations that are supposedly our allies. We know that, our foes like China, what they're doing, but we should not have these barriers to trade. We should not have these, tariffs, which are taxes that are imposed. So we need to be able to break that down. But, we were talking off air about the bifurcating of President Trump. The policies that this guy is implementing, especially from the economic perspective, in 18 months, look at what has happened. I mean, Barack Obama was there for 8 years, and look what happened.
No, it was a disaster.
It was a disaster. So, how can he better articulate that? Or, people are going to hate, but you cannot argue with that number.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. And the economy under Barack Obama grew slowly, but Barack Obama's policies, you were never going to have an overheating economy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Everything about the economy right now is thanks to Obama.
Yeah,
that's right.
It grew slowly, but it was restraining the economy. Once Trump comes in and removes some of these regulations, begins the tax reform and so forth, you're going to have a much hotter economy. Now, sometimes hot economies will overheat, and you get a downturn. But we lost a lot of economic growth because of Obama's restrictions.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, I don't think that you can debate these things. The strength of our military, the strength of our economy, the reduction of the regulations, what have you. Sorry to see what happened with EPA Administrator Pruitt, but at least he got us going on the right direction, and hopefully the deputy will continue on that path. But when we come back from this break, and again, 1-800-351-1212, we want to talk about some of these quote-unquote conservative columnists who are saying that they're leaving the Republican Party and they want a Democratic takeover. What does a Democratic takeover mean for the United States of America and our economy and our military and our standing in the world and the Supreme Court? 1-800-351-1212. Join in the conversation. Alan West, Point of View Radio.
Point of View turned life right side up for Emily's children. Emily listens in Illinois. She and her husband blissfully sent their children off each day to what she called our small, quaint public school until Point of View led them to watch the documentary Indoctrination. She said, "We came to realize the need for us to educate our children at home. We want their education to be built on the solid foundation of Scripture." Emily said that would not have happened were it not for Point of View's bold consistency of shining light on public education. Your support for Point of View changes the future for children like Emily's. It leads people to start schools and ministries and businesses that change lives. How has the Truth Team impacted you? Please invest to bring truth to other families like Emily's. Support Truth today. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Colonel Alan West sitting in, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson. I'm joined here in studio with Kelly Shackelford, President and CEO of First Liberty, and economic mind extraordinaire, Buddy Mathews. And, you know, a lot going on. We hit on it again about the SCOTUS picks and the jobs reports, our economy, and this whole thing about the tariffs going back and forth. And I think that we have to do a better job of explaining these economic points and issues because something is happening in the United States of America when we have folks that are avowed democratic socialists. And I got to tell you, I'm just 57, but never in my life would I have thought that I'd see a person that says I'm a socialist be, on the verge of being elected to the United States House of Representatives or whatever. That's not to say that we don't respect or we don't honor varying ideologies or principles of governance, but something that is the complete antithesis of who we are as a constitutional republic, what we stand for, our founding documents, the relationship between government and the individual. I never thought that we'd get to this point. You know, I was very perplexed when the United States Army just recently commissioned a young man that was an avowed communist. And if you know the story of Lieutenant Spencer Rapone and you saw his graduation photo, he had a T-shirt of Che Guevara underneath, and he had inside his hat, "Communism will win." Well, how can a person like that take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America when he believes in something that he wants to basically undermine and overthrow our duly established government? And so what we want to do now is we want to talk about two, quote-unquote, conservative columnists, George Will and Max Boot, who have now come up and said they don't want to have anything to do with the Republican Party. I really think they don't want to have anything to do with Donald Trump, but yet we just heard previously about we have more people working than ever in the history of the United States of America, and that has happened in the last 18 months because of policies. And I think we don't need to talk about someone's personality. You know, this is not a personality contest. And we didn't vote for the Pope, or we didn't vote for, someone that's going to be an entertainment leader. But when you have people that are now saying that they want, say they're conservative columnists, saying that they want to see a Democratic takeover because that's the only way that they can repair the Republican Party, are these people focused more so on their own self-interest, or are they focused on the interests of the United States of America? So the question that I'm going to pose to Kelly and Buddy that we're going to discuss in this segment and probably the next segment is, what does a Democrat takeover mean from your perspective, Kelly?
Oh, gosh. Well, right now, you're not sure what the Democratic Party really is. They seem to be in transition from, the old Democratic Party to some sort of socialist party. I mean, you had the Bernie Sanders race, which I think without the abuse of power by the Democratic National Committee, he'd have probably beaten Hillary. And if you look at where the energy in the party is, it seems to be this socialist, free college, free, guaranteed income from the government,
free health care,
all of it, and that seems to be the approach. And, boy, the American people are not in favor of that. And that goes to say, without even all the other things. I mean, who would be on the Supreme Court right now? I mean, what kind of court would we be talking about, which would affect, all the other issues that, those who listen to all these Christian stations, care about. So I think it would have a huge, I think it would be a dramatic, this is why I think the left is so apoplectic right now, is the opposite happened. They thought they were getting, that, and, they had the Bernie and everything, and then the Hillary, and they thought they were going to get some combination of that. And instead, they've got Donald Trump. And the thing about Donald Trump is he doesn't seem to care what anybody says, so he can't be influenced. And he's doing all these very conservative things, and it's just making him crazy. And he's having a lot of success. So I think we really have just a huge stark contrast right now. When we watch the socialists who are winning these primaries in the Democratic Party, and meanwhile we have what Trump's doing, despite just withering criticism and bias by the media, yet his poll number, and people don't necessarily like him personally, but yet his poll numbers are going up and up and up. It really is interesting. I think the Democrats are missing out on, they're not learning anything from the elections. They're going further left when the country is like, no, this is what we want, these policies. And I feel like they're about to run into a wall.
1-800-351-1212. To the listeners out there, what does a Democrat takeover look like to you out there? Well, buddy, I think it's summed up by the great James Carville. It's the economy stupid.
It's the economy stupid.
Yeah.
Which is why if the economy is doing well in November, we may very well beat the trend of that midterm election, which typically goes to the other party. But it's also, so if the economy stays strong, and the trade war could end up having a negative impact, but if it stays strong, I think you might end up having a red wave as opposed to a blue wave. In addition, the Democrats are moving so far to the left quickly. Donald Trump, I don't think Democrats understand this. Donald Trump is a reaction to Barack Obama and his leftist pull to the country. That's why people went for Donald Trump. And what the Democrats seem to be saying is, well, we just didn't go left enough. And so you've got the Socialist Democrats being nominated in various places at the State House in Pennsylvania. Four in Pennsylvania just won their primaries for the State House. You've got Bernie Sanders is a Democratic Socialist from Vermont. So you do have one in the Senate. He's an independent. He caucuses with the Democrats. But here just a few months back, Bernie Sanders came out with his Medicare for All, essentially a single-payer health care system. Whenever he came out with that legislation, other Democrats fled the scene. Oh, I've got something. I've got a call. I've got to go take. They did not want to be associated with that. If I remember right, 17 Democrats were on the platform with him, including all of the major Democratic potential presidential nominees, backing that. That has become, Democratic socialism is becoming the Democratic Party now. It's where all the energy is and all the action is. They're moving so far to the left. I think that will be one of the key factors in helping Republicans come November.
Well, 800-351-1212. What does a Democrat takeover look like to you? And I think we've got Gary in Arizona. Gary in Arizona, we're going to you.
Yes. Am I online now?
You are online. How are you, Gary?
Okay. I am 74 years of age, and I remember back in the 50s and the 60s when everyone in the country considered the Democratic Party the party of all people, and the ACLU was heaven sent. But it's turned completely around now. To me, I can't even, in my mind, fathom where they're going. I mean, they're beating themselves down to death.
You're absolutely right, Gary, and I want to thank you. And I got to tell you that I was just out in Tombstone, Arizona this past weekend. What a great treat. But my parents were registered Democrats. When I grew up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, John Lewis was my congressional representative. But my parents believed in faith. They believed in family. They believed in education. They believed in individual responsibility. They believed in service to the nation because my dad was a World War II veteran. I don't see today's Democrat Party standing for this. And so, again, I'm asking, why would a conservative columnist, an esteemed folks like George Will and Max Boot say, we want to see a Democrat takeover? Is it about them? Because it sure seems that they don't want the best interest of the country at heart.
Well, and as you point out, the Democratic Party has just moved so far to the left now. If you were to have someone like a Senator Sam Nunn from Georgia,
oh, absolutely,
Zell
Miller,
those kinds of people, they would give Republicans a real fight for some of these things. But those people are gone almost.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. The Blue Dog Democrats are dead. Dan Boren of Oklahoma, gone. Heath Shuler, who used to be a quarterback at my alma mater, University of Tennessee, gone. Connor Lamb, who won in Pennsylvania, he sounded more like a Republican than the guy that was running as a Republican, Rick Saccone. But yet, I don't think that he has a future in that party.
I think the answer to your question on George Will and Max Boot is I think it's a a junior high temper tantrum. You know, they don't like Trump. They're angry and they're doing crazy stuff because, you know, if you look at results, if you look at the economy, if you look at the reduction of regulations, you look at the Supreme Court being returned to proper judges who are going to restore power back to the people and not take everything over thinking they know what's best for our country, despite whatever the Constitution says. I mean, we can go down a long list of things. They should be really pleased with all those things, and certainly on the side of the free market economy. So I think it's a temper tantrum.
1-800-351-1212. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about what does a Democratic takeover look like. Alan West, Point of View Radio.
There's a welcome shift away from the social engineering in the military that drains readiness programs. The U.S. Army released an official memo stating that transgender training is complete across the total Army. For 2 years, the Army has been conducting mandatory transgender integration training. 2 Obama-era directives necessitated this. One changed military policy as of July 1, 2016, so that an individual could no longer be discharged for being transgender. On July 1, 2017, the military services were scheduled to begin allowing transgender individuals to join the armed forces. The Army spent time and money preparing leaders to deal with biological men being allowed in women's showers, gender transition, and even male pregnancies. Family Research Council points out that's time our military can never get back. The Trump administration looked at these readiness issues and the massive price tag for taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries and non-deployability of transgender troops. Based on research presented to him by several members of Congress, Secretary of Defense James Mattis recommended the Obama policy be reversed. The military returned to the pre-2016 policy in which transgender individuals who suffer from gender dysphoria are prohibited from serving in the military. Gender dysphoria is defined as a conflict between an individual's biological gender and the gender with which they identify. The Pentagon concluded that these individuals, quote, experience significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. There is a carve-out in the policy for transgenders to serve, provided they don't suffer from gender dysphoria, have been stable in their gender for 36 months, and meet requirements for deployability. The Army's memo states its training shift is designed to refocus on soldiers' ability to fight in combat. FRC's Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin has insisted all along the military is a fighting force, not a gender clinic. The new policy faces lawsuits, but it must stand. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Colonel Alan West here, guest hosting Point of View for Herbie Anderson. We're here with Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews, and we're talking about what does a Democrat takeover look like? Because we just had a couple of conservative columnists, George Will and Max Boot, say they're leaving the GOP and they prefer a Democrat takeover. And we got a call from Michael up in Maine who wants to talk to us about, well, his senator, Susan Collins. Michael, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you all for taking my call, and that's pretty much my comment. I'll hang up and listen. But yes, Susan Collins always seems, even though she's Republican, always seems to vote Democrat, like on the ACA when that came up a while ago. And anyway, so she votes with the Democrats, but when the vote really doesn't matter, she votes Republican. So my opinion, she's got to go, and I'll hang up and listen.
Well, I got to tell you this, Kelly. She was out there and she said, I'm not voting for a nominee that, takes this position, when it came to the Supreme Court pick. Right.
She's the concern. She's come out and the Alaska Senator Murkowski.
Mm-hmm.
They're both pro-abortion, and they both don't want anybody on the court that's going on the Supreme Court that has said anything or believes anything about overturning Roe v. Wade. And so that's part of the calculus that the president is having to take into account when he's figuring this out. Now, I think there's a counterbalance to that, which is I think that let's say they pick the one that's considered the most, will be probably the biggest fight, which would be Amy Coney Barrett, who is a very strong Catholic. Has been criticized because she's, even a part of her praise and worship group. She's actually serious about her faith. As Dianne Feinstein said, what worried her was that the dogma lived loudly within her. By the way, somebody told me today.
It sounds like an Exorcist line or something.
Somebody told me today they just bought a shirt. They saw a shirt that said, "The dogma lives loudly within me." They said, "I couldn't resist it. I bought it. I'm wearing it." So anyway, but if, she's the one that they consider Notre Dame law professor, mm-hmm. Catholic, everybody's like, well, she's probably pretty strong pro-life and all this. And we don't know if we can get Murkowski's vote. We don't know if we can get Susan Collins' vote. Well, what if you're Joe Manchin and you're in West Virginia and Trump won that state by, was it?
A gazillion.
It was almost 40 points.
Yeah.
Or it was crazy, okay?
Yeah. Or North Dakota or Missouri with Claire McCaskill.
Can you afford to? So I even wonder if even if those two, I don't know. I can't imagine, we'll see, but I can't imagine that the two Republican women, Collins and Murkowski, would vote against the president's nominee for the Supreme Court. But even if they did, I wonder if the Democrats wouldn't override that, because if you're Manchin and you vote against the nominee,
you're done.
I think you lose your seat.
Yeah, you do.
I think you might do that in 3 or 4 different states. Yeah. So I wonder if the president doesn't have a little cushion to take care of Collins and Murkowski and Alaska.
Well, let me ask Michael a question. Is he still on, Michael?
Yeah, he's still listening. Yeah,
Michael. Does Maine? The thing that troubles me though is, can Maine elect a more conservative person than Susan Collins? So if Susan Collins is the best you can get from a conservative standpoint in Maine, then you live with the contradictions and you just go forward. If her leaving means you end up getting a much more liberal Democrat in there, then that works against us.
Well, I think that's one of the issues that you see happening up there in the Northeast, where, folks are coming out of Massachusetts and they're impacting New Hampshire and Maine. New Hampshire, live free or die. Live free or die. Yeah, I mean, that's not how they're operating now. And so, I think that you may be going to see some changes, just the same as we have the influx of Californians coming here to Texas. And you look at all the major urban centers, the Dallas, the Austin, the San Antonio, the Houston. But again, 1-800-351-1212. When you look at these two conservative columnists, George Will and Max Boot, who are saying they're leaving the GOP, and they're wishing for a Democrat takeover to help refine the GOP, help a new rebirth of the GOP. What does that really mean? And let's talk again about this universal basic income.
Universal basic income, right.
I mean, this is what a Democrat takeover would look like.
Absolutely. The universal basic income is the notion that everybody, whether it's just a state-based or federal-based, everybody gets a check from the poorest to the richest person. They usually talk in the range of sort of $900 to $1,000 a month. But it is so costly that if you were to give everybody in the country a $10,000 check, as liberals have pointed out, some liberals who say, I like the idea, but we just can't afford it, we would spend more than $3 trillion in 1 year. Total federal revenue is a little over $3 trillion in the same year. So
let me ask you this question, because this was an important point. Everybody in the country or every U.S. citizen?
Well, that is... It depends upon which liberal you're talking to, because some do not want to have the restriction of the U.S. citizenship on there. They would be willing to allow everybody in the country. Others might scale it back. And then even some others would come up and say, well, yeah, it doesn't make any sense for us to give checks to Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. But if you're going to take out the richest people, then you're in essence becoming a means-tested welfare program. And we've got 80 of those, and we still haven't gotten rid of poverty.
You know what was amazing to me when you talk about the hypocrisy of the left, and we'll get to your caller in Georgia. I just want to bring it up. But the head tax, the employee head tax that was up there in Seattle, who was the person that stepped in and said, no way? Jeff Bezos.
Yes, Amazon.
You know, the big, Uber leftist, runs the Washington Post. But all of a sudden, when it's going to hit his interests, it's like, no, we can't do this.
Yep, it was going to be a big deal. It was going to take a lot of money, and they pushed back on it.
Socialism works great as long as you don't run out of
other people's money. Or in their case, you don't use my money. Okay, you go and find all the conservatives out there, and you make them pay for this stuff.
But it's interesting because what they wanted to do that was to help the homeless population, because California, Washington State, and some others have huge homeless population problems now. As you get sort of whole tent cities developing there, and so one of the things they're looking at doing is trying to provide very inexpensive or free housing, along with free income, free health care, and other things for these people.
It just don't work. Let's go to Vern in Georgia, my birth state. Vern, you're on the air here at Point of View Radio. Hello, Vern.
Yes, sir.
Hey, you're on the air.
Good for me. I am 88 years old. I'm an inventor and have been since I was 22 years old. And I am one of the few that think. I've never voted for the party. I've always voted for the person. And therein lies our problem, I believe. You can't just vote for a party. Half the people that vote for these parties don't know what they believe.
No, and I'll absolutely agree with you. I'm coming up on a hard break, Vern, so I appreciate you calling in. But you're right. You call into question, what is it that people are voting for? Kelly just shared with us, we have more Americans working than any other time in the history of the United States of America. So why would you come up and say that I want no part of this? I want the antithetical perspective on economics or philosophy of governance to take over this country. To make what point? Because you don't like a person? You're going to put your country at risk because you don't like a person? And so I think this is an incredible thing that not a lot of people are talking about, this decision by George Will and Max Boot. But we are here. And when we come back from this break at the top of the hour, we're going to our final hour. We're going to talk more about what does America look like in the future. And we want to hear your thoughts and perspectives on that. Alan West, Point of View Radio.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a Truth Team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
Greetings, everyone. Final hour of Point of View on this Friday, the 6th of July. Alan West, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson. I'm joined in studio with Kelly Shackelford and also Buddy Mathews. We've been talking about the big topics, the SCOTUS election, and also our economy, the jobs report, and this whole thing about a trade war and tariffs going back and forth, because a lot is going on, and we want to keep you informed. We want to share thoughts, perspectives, and insights with you. 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212 to join in on the discussion with us. You know, we closed out the last hour. We were talking about George Will and Max Boot, two conservative columnists who said that they're leaving the GOP because they just, well, you know, it's all about that Trump guy. It doesn't matter about the economy. It doesn't matter about, you know, our foreign policy. The fact that North Korea has been brought to a negotiating table and we have a Secretary of State over there right now. They want to see a Democratic takeover.
And, you know, Alan, I the only thing I can think of is they just don't like the abandoning sort of the diplomatic norms where you treat everybody as if they're great people. And, you know, the IPI, the Institute for Policy Innovation, where I am, we're an NGO of the World Intellectual Property Organization, a UN body. And you go to these UN bodies and everybody, you're sitting across from people who are tyrants, despots, and so forth, and everybody treats everybody well, and you have to act like this person is not a problem. And I sat and listened to somebody from Sudan one time mentioned the reason that Sudan is so backwards is because they don't have access to wireless internet. And you sit and listen to some of these things, and you think, this is just...
And they want you to pay for it.
They want me to pay for it. It is crazy stuff. And Donald Trump came in to break up some of those norms, and he's not diplomatic in the traditional sense. And we'll see, that may work out much better for us, but it has some people upset because it's just not that tradition.
That traditional diplomacy hadn't really worked very well.
It's the swamp.
It is. Trump derangement syndrome. We thought it was only from the left. I think it's from the left and the right. I think it's equal opportunity offender, and people just kind of lose their mind. I mean, again, look at all the stuff the Democrats are doing right now. It seems like, you know, I don't know. I mean, if I didn't know better, and I don't think this is it, I think for whatever reason, God is showing his favor to President Trump, because I don't think he's this smart. But it's almost like he's causing his enemy to do all the best things to get his side reelected.
No, you're right. From a military perspective, you are watching your enemy do everything, thing wrong as far as strategy and tactics. So why would you want to get into the way?
Let's climb up the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July, disrespect a monument, and all these people who came to visit the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July are told they have to leave. That'll be a great tool. That'll win us a lot of support. And then I'll get up and speak against the immigration policy.
Well, you know, that's what I can't understand. If there were people, 4,300 people had to be evacuated. I mean, could not go see the Statue of Liberty. If there were people that were apolitical, they ain't no more.
That's right.
I mean, because now your foolishness has impacted my life. And before I go to the to listen to the person from
Let's
California,
get rid of ICE too.
Here we are.
That was the point, to get rid of ICE.
This is what ICE did in 2017. The White House released this yesterday, Thursday. Illegal immigrants arrested by ICE responsible for 48,000 assault offenses in 2017, 5,000 sexual assaults, 2,000 kidnappings, 1,800 homicides, 76,000 major drug crimes. The ICE Homeland Security Investigations Unit arrested 4,818 gang members, apprehended seized 980,000 pounds of narcotics, 2,370 pounds of fentanyl, 6,967 pounds of heroin was seized. And you're going to climb the Statue of Liberty on Independence Day and hang a banner that says abolish ICE, and that's what they did in 2017? Sorry.
And then run as a socialist.
And then run as a socialist.
And get elected in New York City and these places. I mean, again, I'm really – and then say things to imply that you're okay with violence against your opponents and interrupting their meals with their families. And I'm like, what else is left that's a really bad idea they haven't tried right now?
It's these people that ICE have been arresting. Where they move into is low-income areas where some of these people say they represent.
And they're terrorizing people.
That's where the chaos would be.
Yeah, terrorizing people. Let's go to Fletch in California. Fletch, you're on Point of View Radio, and you want to comment on George Will.
It's a pleasure to talk to you guys. I think that these commentators that are switching parties are just no more than the swamp. They have lost their provenance. They've lost their star power, and they want it back. Nobody's turning to them for advice. When there's an enemy to fight, then people would turn to George Will. They'd listen to him. He had an opinion. But nobody's really interested in his opinions anymore because there's been a change in the country and a change in direction. And it's all about power and it's all about money, and those guys are not in that power position anymore because they're part of the swamp, and therefore they're not getting that money that they would normally get. So they will leave and go to somewhere where they're appreciated, where somebody will talk to them and listen to them, because Trump's not going to listen to them nor talk to them.
I tell you what, that's a great point, Fletch. And again, folks, 800-351-1212, because we want to know your assessment, your ideas, your thoughts, perspectives, opinions on George Will and Max Boot leaving the GOP, and they prefer now a Democrat takeover. And, buddy, you were talking about Max Boot and, how you invited him in to speak.
I knew Max Boot several years ago when he was with the Wall Street Journal, and we had him in to speak in the late 90s after he had just published a book. But he's a foreign policy expert. But I think he is one of those who sort of embraces the notion of we always used to do it this way, so that's the way we need to be doing it now. And as you point out, it just hasn't always worked.
It hasn't always worked. And I think that Fletch brought up a great point when, these folks are used to going out and getting the $20,000 and $30,000 speaking gigs and everything like that. And all of a sudden, no one's ringing them up. Yeah. But yet they can now switch over and go on ABC or CNN or MSNBC, and even though no one's watching them on MSNBC.
Now, we'll say this, too. While you've got Max Boot and George Will saying these things, you've also got this movement starting, the walk-away movement.
Yes, that's the other side of it.
Yeah, where liberals that are saying, what is going on in the Democratic Party? Because this is getting crazy, and I'm not going to be a part of this, and I'm walking away from this. So you've got some, it's going on that direction as well.
Well, it's interesting because that hashtag walk-away movement was just an everyday guy.
Yes.
They did a video. But now we have these muckety-mucks, the Republican strategists and everything. And I think it is about no one wants me to, my little rice bowl has been upset. And someone has done what into my Wheaties, and they're not happy about it. So it is funny to see these folks that are searching for relevance right now.
I'd love to have people and just put up 156 million jobs, record number of jobs, and say if they want that, and just do the list and let them do the results and choose that or not.
It's the economy, stupid. We'll be right back, and we'll take our call from Helen.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Will robots destroy jobs and put all of us in the unemployment lines? Some futurists seem to be predicting this scenario. Jay Richards disagrees. He says it is an old argument that is new again. He is the author of the book, The Human Advantage, The Future of American Work in an Age of Smart Machines. One report predicts that the future of robots appears to be a dystopian march to rising inequality, falling wages, and higher unemployment. A number of books warn of the rise of robots and even suggest that this new technology will lead to the death of capitalism. Jay Richards acknowledges that we have a coming disruption that could be as abrupt as the Industrial Revolution. But looking back, we can see that previous revolutions didn't lead to the end of employment. They often provided new jobs without the boredom and danger of the past. And if it is true that technology leads to permanent unemployment of the masses, the history of the last few centuries would be a history of joblessness. That is not true, but some politicians accept the faulty premise that jobs will be scarce, therefore have proposed the idea of a universal basic income that would essentially put millions more on welfare. One obvious problem would be money. The government is going broke right now with various entitlement programs. Expanding that is economically unrealistic. And do we really want to pay millions more in this country not to do work? The lesson to government and education is to stop training kids to do jobs that robots will be doing in a few years. The lesson for parents and their children is to focus on developing skills a robot would never take away from you. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Alan West, guest hosting for Kirby Anderson, and we have Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews here. 800-351-1212, 800-351-1212. We're asking a very simple question right now. George Will, Max Boot, conservative columnists leaving the GOP. They prefer a Democrat takeover. What do you think a Democrat takeover looks like? We're going to go to Helen in North Carolina. Helen, how are you doing? Your own point of view.
Thank you. I've been wondering for a long time, a lot of the problems that we are having now, many of which end up with riots in the cities and that sort of thing, they're all bankrolled by people like George Soros. How in the world does he get away with it? Is there anything that we can do to stop him?
Well, you know what? That's a great question, Helen. And I will tell you that just last weekend we saw this group called Antifa, which supposedly stands for anti-fascism.
Right.
But yet they don't want people to be able to speak freely. Mm-hmm. They just had a clash out in Oregon. That's funded by George Soros. And then also you have Black Lives Matter, which for whatever reason I've never seen them in Chicago on the South Side. I've never seen them say anything about, like I say, the 17, 18 million black babies that have been murdered in the womb since Roe v. Wade. Only certain lives matter, and they're politicized lives. I think that we have to look at an organization like Antifa, and they should be declared a domestic terrorist organization.
Yeah, and to answer your question directly, Helen, it's very difficult to ever get anybody for giving money to an organization, even if the organization's bad, because then you have to go and prove that they knew, that they were giving to something and that they were going to do something criminal with the money, and that it's just almost impossible. the Holy Land Foundation lawsuit was a huge lawsuit, and that was difficult enough just to show these groups were connected to terrorist groups, but they would never be able to, get somebody, for instance, who made a donation to them because they could never prove that they knew all these connections and everything. So it's very difficult. And I think one of the questions I always ask is, where's the George Soros? Where are the George Soroses on the conservative side or on the Christian side that are using their money? Where's the, we got that prophecy with the guy and about the media turning towards Trump. Well, where's the guy that has all the money buying one of the major medias that actually do it right?
Mm-hmm.
That actually are fair and truthful. And so we kind of got to challenge ourselves with some of that as well. But you're right. It's horrible, a lot of the things that George Soros has funded.
And, Helen, it's not just George Soros. Representative Lamar Smith has published a couple of papers where he has been looking at Russian involvement in funding the environmental movement, funneling money through offshore accounts that then go to the environmental movement, which then goes and attacks fracking and drilling and so forth, because Russia gets about 40% of the government's revenue comes from their oil and gas revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that's not affecting the election. It's just getting it's Russia sort of standing in its interest, and there's new information coming out about that now as they're continuing to look into this. But you have some of the groups out there that are funded from ranges of different organizations and countries and so forth, and it's oftentimes funneled through various types of banks so you can't find where the direct ties come from.
Well, hopefully that may be one of the topics that President Trump will discuss with Vladimir Putin next week. Thanks so much, Helen. Now we're going to go to Patricia, right here in the great Lone Star State of Texas. Patricia, you're on Point of View.
Okay, I was just answering your question. What would it look like with a Democrat takeover? I said for Christians and people that live by moral values, it would be hell on earth.
Well, that's pretty blunt.
I don't know. I don't know many of the people that you see outspoken with their democratic views that have anything moral about them. So, and if they are moral, I don't know how they could even be a Democrat. So, because their platform is, killing babies and things like that. So anyway, that's just what it would look like to me. So I think we need to stay in prayer for our president and for our nation.
Well, speaking of staying in prayer, please go to the Pray for America tab here at Point of View Ministries, Point of View Radio, and click on that, because one of the things that Kelly brought up is we have this decision on a Supreme Court justice, which is a huge decision. I mean, that has a huge impact on the future of this country, that we can get the right person. And then, also pray, Monday night, that whoever that nominee is, they will be able to stand strong and they will withstand the fiery darts and arrows, that they will have that full armor that it talks about in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 18, because that's what they're going to need when they sit there in front of Dianne Feinstein and some of those other chuckle brains up there. But
that's right.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And, something you had to be concerned about here in the great state of Texas, look at what is happening right here where we are in Dallas. Look at what is happening in San Antonio. Look at what is happening in Austin, in Houston, and El Paso. So if we think that even here in the great state of Texas that we're insulated from this happening in our own backyard, we got a fight on our hands right here. And that's why when I hear people say turn Texas blue, that is the most obnoxious, offensive thing that anyone could ever say to me living here in the great state of Texas. So thank you so much, Patricia. God bless you and have a great weekend. Again, 1-800-351-1212. Max Boot, George Will, leaving the GOP. They think that the GOP, the Republican Party, needs to be punished. They want a Democratic takeover. What would that Democrat takeover look like to you?
It's amazing to me, because if you're a George Will or Max Boot and you said, I just can't take the way the Republican Party is going, wouldn't you say then, I'll be a libertarian then or something of that nature? But moving towards the Democrat, that's completely the opposite of what they have promoted over the years. That's a mystery to me. I can understand a Republican saying, I can't do this, but there's a Libertarian Party. I don't understand them going in that direction.
Well, I don't understand. Just put out the results and take away Trump and put out the 156 million people working, most in the history of the country, and one regulation passed for every 22
Taken
repealed.
away. Yeah.
Jerusalem is now the capital, the embassy for Israel. I mean, we just keep going down. Supreme Court justices. I mean, just whatever. Just look at the issues, the things that are happening, and then say, no, I don't want that. Those are all things that supposedly, these people want.
And we just discussed that. Does George Will and Max Boot know that not a single Democrat representative or senator was there when that embassy opened up? Mm-hmm. Not a single one.
Mm-hmm. But remember James Webb, this is former senator from Virginia, was running for the Democratic nomination. If the Democratic Party was moving in the James Webb direction, I could see somebody saying, "Well, I can't go with Donald Trump, but I can endorse somebody like a James Webb." But that's not where they're going. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren
Booker.
That's Cory Booker. That's the Democratic Party, the future of the Democratic Party. Now.
I'm telling you that they're going to run Kamala Harris for president in 2020. That's who they are just going, over is Kamala Harris, because they think that once again they can win on the woman thing, but it's going to be a minority woman and she's, good looking, charismatic, or whatever. Just the same as they talk about this young lady from up there in the Bronx. Hey, let's go to Wilbert in California. Wilbert, you're on with Point of View.
Hey, how you doing there? Yeah, I heard about that. And OPIC, it's OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporation. They opened it in 1971 in Washington, the Democrats, Republicans, and it was a thing to help the third world nations. And what it was is they were having a trade thing for other third world nations where they can actually have our companies in America go overseas. And if they had a problem, they can come back. But it worked too well, and all our labor, like in Detroit, Washington, or L.A., New York, Chicago, all the empty buildings, that's where that's from. And a lot of lobbyist things came out of that, like the oil stuff, Arab countries, Chinese, stuff like that. Democrats, Republicans both get it. It'd be even worse, the Democrats, if they don't have too much moral stuff, biblical morals, since the world laughs wicked prophecies and stuff. But anyway, I just want to let you guys know that it's kind of a hidden thing. It's a 1971 OPIC, not OPEC with oil, but OPIC 1971 administration. Every president gets it in administration.
There have been a number of factors that have driven businesses out, including our tax system. If you were based here in the U.S., you automatically started with a 35% corporate income tax, and you had 2 or 3 or 4% on state income tax on top of that in most states, whereas European Union was down around 21%. That drove a number of businesses. Some of the things that were going on at the EPA, you have to have the fuel standards, what we call the CAFE standards. Some companies, Ford and others, said, well, we're gonna have to make these small cars in order to be able to meet the CAFE standards. Let's make them in Mexico or someplace because we lose money on all these things, and so let's make them someplace where it's cheaper. So some of that's coming back now.
It is incredible. Thanks so much, Wilbert from California. And Jamie, we'll be hearing from you when we come back from this break. Alan West, Point of View Radio. Thank you.
If you've listened for any length of time, you've probably heard about Point of View listeners who've done amazing things, started ministries, found their life's calling, impacted their city, their state, the nation. But let me be clear, you don't have to have a huge impact to be faithful. I thought about that when I read a note from Joanne in Texas. She admitted, up until recently, I've not had much of a political view, nor have I ever been so informed. But since I signed up for your email and website information, I can now get the correct information that the public is oblivious to. Joanne ended by thanking us for the Take Action section of our website, where we make it easy for you to express your views on key issues with your elected representatives. Everything we do on the air, online, through mail and email is made possible through people like you who invest in Point of View, so we can invest in issues that matter. Take your place on the Truth Team. Call 1-800-347-5151 or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Greetings, everyone. Colonel Alan West joined in studio. Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews. 800-351-1212 to call in and join in on the conversation. And speaking of which, we're going to go to Jamie in South Carolina. Jamie, you're on Point of View Radio.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great, man.
Hey, I was thinking about, if we have a Democratic takeover, I hope we don't become an Islamic State. But, there's probably sleepers already in the Congress and Senate and judges. But, we had a Democrat president, and look at the Iran deal, and, look what's happening, that you don't care about Israel. And I'll let you take over from now.
Well, I want to thank you for that comment, Jamie, and without a doubt, we know that you did have some very interesting people, in the Obama administration, especially in the Homeland Security. A lot of folks don't know that the Council for American Islamic Relations, which there are several countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council, have designated that as a terrorist organization, but yet CARE has an office right on Capitol Hill. So we have to be very concerned about that. But let me give you just a little tidbit. Justin Trudeau in Canada, they have decided to give $25 million of Canadian taxpayer money to a group that has been linked to Hezbollah and Hamas because they want to, guess what? They want to squelch Islamophobia.
And we just learned this past week that apparently, if the story is true, President Obama granted, 2,500 citizenship to 2,500 people, Iranians. Again, another one of those side deals that the administration absolutely denied that they had when they tried to push through the Iran.
Well, as Nancy Pelosi said, we have to pass the bill in order to find out what is in it. So now we're starting to find out what was really in the Iranian nuclear agreement afterwards. But, hey, we're going to pivot over because Kelly has a real interesting case. And since we have been talking about the Supreme Court and everything, this case of Mary Ann Souse, I'm telling you, and it's, all of these stories are posted to the Point of View website, but this particular case is really going to rankle you. So tell us about Mary Ann Souse.
Well, Mary Ann lives in government housing, and she had one of her neighbors didn't like that she was listening to conservative radio, and they called the police and said her radio's too loud, and they came to her door and tried to get in, and she had been sexually assaulted before, so she didn't know who these people were, and so that kind of made them angry, the police, and so they ended up coming back and without a search warrant or anything, and still kind of forced their way in. But when she realized they were police, she was fine. And but then they, I guess because of their attitude, anyway, they just treated her horribly. First thing she did is hold up her Constitution and say, "I know what my rights are," and they said, "quote, that's not worth the paper it's written on." And then they proceeded to search her house without a search warrant. And she said, "What are you doing?" And said, "We're going to arrest you." And she said, "For what?" She said, "We don't know yet." And ordered her to sit down. And she sat down. And so while one of the officers was going through her house, the other officer standing there, she said, "Well, if it's okay, I'm going to pray." And so she was sitting in her own house. And he said, "Do whatever you want." She's praying. The other guy comes back in and says, "What's she doing?" He said, "Praying." And he said, "Stop that. You're not going to pray while we're in your house." And
now, what state is this in?
This is in Kansas, and she's ordered not to pray. Well, they ended up leaving and harassing her and all this stuff, and she, on her own, with a pencil and a notepad, writes out a lawsuit.
Oh man!
And files it in federal court. And the federal judge, it's in the motion to dismiss. So the way motions to dismiss work is you have to take all the facts as true. Mm-hmm. But their argument was, even if all the facts are true, we didn't violate anything. And so the federal judge threw her case out. And so we saw it and went, this is horrible. You can't allow it, and so she needs help. So we came in and represented her, went to the Federal Court of Appeals. The Federal Court of Appeals said, these facts are really, we've never seen anything this bad. And they said, because of that, there's no case directly on point. And so maybe the police officers didn't know that they couldn't do this.
Oh, yeah, right.
And so they said, so we're going to give them immunity this time because the facts are so extreme that maybe they didn't know. So anyway, this goes to the Supreme Court, and we've just been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting on the court on what they're going to do. And the last day of the term, last Thursday, they've issued all the opinions of the cases that have been argued. Mm-hmm. And the last day, there's what's called miscellaneous orders. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of things that they clean up at the end. And there's an opinion in there. Basically, we had told them, look, you don't even have to set this for oral argument. This is a violation. You just need to rule. Mm-hmm. Well, they granted the case and then reversed below and then sent it back down. So they didn't even need an oral argument. They reversed this and sent it back down. So the very last day of the session, Marianne Sauce got a victory. She'd been waiting all this time. And
6 years almost.
Well, she just, we just been sitting there waiting for the court. Are they going to take the case? They're not going to take the case. What are they going to do? How are they going to? And so it was, it was a victory at the Supreme Court. But it just reminds us why it's really important who's on the Supreme Court, because they don't. 99% of the cases that go up, they just cert deny. It means they don't take them either way. They don't say yay or nay. They just say we're not taking that case. So it is really important that you get good justices up there because they've got to take the right cases and they got to do the right thing. And so this was a great piece of news at the very end of the term, but it just goes to show that these things really matter and not only in Marianne's life, but that precedent is out there affecting millions of people now about we can't have people coming into your home and telling you can't pray.
No, that's your very first liberty.
And Kelly, when you say the Supreme Court decides not to take it, that doesn't necessarily mean they won't take a future case, right? Sometimes they may say this is interesting, but we want to have something that's a little more compelling along that line, or something that's a little clearer, or something of that nature.
That's right. I mean, one of the other cases, for instance, the other thing in that last miscellaneous order is we had two other cases sitting there. One was out of the Fourth Circuit, and one was out of the Sixth Circuit. They both were the same facts. They were about, can a county commissioner open up the county commission meetings in prayer? Mm-hmm. And in the Sixth Circuit, it said, oh, of course they can. And we've been doing that since the founding of the country. The Fourth Circuit, which is now very liberal, Obama really replaced a lot of those. So they said, no, this is unconstitutional now. So you've got the law meaning one thing in one circuit and one in the other. So, I mean, there's 7 or 8 different states where the law is changing depending upon, which state you're in and what the Constitution now means. Well, everybody's like, well, they got to take that. They got to, well, they didn't. So the one we won, we kept our victory. The one we lost, we kept the defeat. And there was a dissent from the denial of taking the case written by Justice Thomas and Gorsuch saying, how can we not take this? Mm-hmm. We've got to take this. The Constitution is changing meanings in all these different states, depending upon what state you're in. And now Kennedy was leaving. We didn't know that at the time, but it's about to be announced. So it takes 4 to grant cert. So we probably had 3, and they realized we don't have a 4th, so they didn't take it. They waited till the very end, and so that next justice you see the difference. That next justice could make the difference in which cases they take, which cases they don't, religious freedom, all these different issues, and so it highlights what's going to happen in great theater Monday night with the president. And I think the president said publicly that he will have his decision made by Sunday, and then he'll announce it Monday night. And so, time to pray. That's Point of View has it on their website where you can go and sign up and be on the prayer team, and they'll keep you up to date. Certainly at firstliberty.org, we're going to have information on the cases as well as the different justices, and certainly who is nominated. But I would really encourage people to be in prayer.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, when you have these guys like a George Wheeler or Max Boot saying that they want to have a Democratic takeover, what does that mean for like a Supreme Court? So now all of a sudden that little lady there in Lewisburg, Kansas, Marianne Sauce, how does that impact her life? How does it impact it when all of a sudden you have people that can take a politicized document to a secret court, a judge that we don't know, and now, next thing you know, you have warrantless spying going on an American citizen. This is not the type of stuff that should be happening in the United States of America. So hats off for doing that and standing up for Marianne. And Marianne, if you are listening, God bless you, and keep praying. Keep praying in your home. Keep praying wherever, because that is your first liberty, your first right, your freedom of religion.
People that think they can't do anything, Marianne Sauce didn't have any power. She just had a pencil and a pad of paper. And she ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court and getting a reversal.
And she has the title of American.
Amen.
That's why you can do something. And that's what 56 men set in motion 242 years ago, this past week, this past Wednesday that we celebrate. And that's the greatness of America. All right, we're going to be coming back for our final segment for this Independence Day week. And if you can call in quickly, tell us about what Independence Day means to you as we get ready to head out for the weekend. Colonel Allen West, Kelly Shackelford, Buddy Mathews, Point of View Radio. We'll be right back.
There's a welcome shift away from the social engineering in the military that drains readiness programs. The U.S. Army released an official memo stating that transgender training is complete across the total Army. For 2 years, the Army has been conducting mandatory transgender integration training. 2 Obama-era directives necessitated this. One changed military policy as of July 1, 2016, so that an individual could no longer be discharged for being transgender. On July 1, 2017, the military services were scheduled to begin allowing transgender individuals to join the armed forces. The Army spent time and money preparing leaders to deal with biological men being allowed in women's showers, gender transition, and even male pregnancies. Family Research Council points out that's time our military can never get back. The Trump administration looked at these readiness issues and the massive price tag for taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries and non-deployability of transgender troops. Based on research presented to him by several members of Congress, Secretary of Defense James Mattis recommended the Obama policy be reversed. The military returned to the pre-2016 policy in which transgender individuals who suffer from gender dysphoria are prohibited from serving in the military. Gender dysphoria is defined as a conflict between an individual's biological gender and the gender with which they identify. The Pentagon concluded that these individuals, quote, experience significant distress and impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning. There is a carve-out in the policy for transgenders to serve, provided they don't suffer from gender dysphoria, have been stable in their gender for 36 months, and meet requirements for deployability. The Army's memo states its training shift is designed to refocus on soldiers' ability to fight in combat. FRC's Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin has insisted all along the military is a fighting force, not a gender clinic. The new policy faces lawsuits, but it must stand. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Colonel Allen West guest hosting here for Kirby Anderson, and I'm joined in studio with Kelly Shackelford and Buddy Mathews. Our last segment for this week has been Independence Week. And if you can, 800-351-1212, and just quickly talk to us about what Independence Day means to you being here in the great United States of America. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about some of the other little small things that have been happening this week. And one of the things that we saw just, I guess, last night was that Scott Pruitt, the administrator of the EPA, stepped down. I got to tell you, in the military, we live by a very simple code, and it's all about character. That means doing what is right when no one's watching you. So I'm not going to give up a bunch of crocodile tears for Mr. Pruitt. If you know that people are after you, if you know that you're a target, as you said, buddy, you got to be above reproach.
You know, if you're going in at the EPA, that the left is going to, you're going to be the main target for the left. So you have to be able to be above reproach on everything. It's hard in this day of fake news to know exactly what might be made up or exaggerated or things of that nature. But it was pretty much daily revelations of various things, whether or not they were all true, quite accurate, inaccurate or something. It was just none of the other administration people were getting hit quite like this. And so Scott has decided to step down. We all know him. So, I mean, full disclosure, I think we all know him. He's a great guy, really good guy.
He was doing great things policy-wise.
Yes. And so I don't know what happened there. It'll be interesting to hear his story as he comes out from this. But he did get the EPA rattled, but he got it on the right track.
Yes, he did.
And I'll say this, I knew Scott from years ago. He actually was a volunteer attorney for us on religious liberty cases. So a person who's willing to give their time when they could be billing clients, that's a person that's willing to sacrifice. So I say that because obviously Point of View is on Christian stations all over the country. This is a person who believes in Christ, who is going through a tough time right now. Again, maybe he made some mistakes. Pray for him. He's a brother, and he did some really good things for the country. I mean, I think part of the reason we see the boom in the economy, and the headline I saw on Drudge today, 156 million people working record in the United States, is because of the reduction of these regulations and things. So God bless him for the good work that he did while he was at the EPA.
It's all about redemption. Let's go to Santos in Arizona. Santos, you're on Point of View Radio.
Thank you for taking my call. Yeah. Well, my comment is that I've worked for Trump. I've been following his since he became president and all that. And my comment is that the Bible talks about the Nebuchadnezzar. God, what he did to Nebuchadnezzar, they left it brainless. And the Democrat right now, that's what they're doing. They don't have no brain at all. They don't have nothing to offer. And I know, I believe with all my heart that God put Trump there for a reason. And I see what they're doing to those Democrats. God is doing to those Democrats. They left it brainless.
Well,
so that's my comment, and I thank you for taking my call.
Thank you so much, Santos. God bless you. And you're right. I think it was the story of Esther. It was you were made for a time such as this. Yes. And when you think about, God used Cyrus, he used Nebuchadnezzar, he used Xerxes, for the betterment of his people. So you don't know who God is going to use. I mean, when Samuel went down to the house of Jesse, and all the big strapping sons came out, and Samuel thought, well, I'm going to anoint this one. God was like, nope, not that one,
not that one.
And then finally, the little scrawny kid came in from out there tending the sheep, and God said, yeah, that's the one. Yep. So again, as we have that tab here at Point of View Radio on the website, pray for our president, pray for this country, and again, this has nothing to do with R&D. But this is a very important time with the decision with the Supreme Court justice going to visit with Vladimir Putin next week, going to discuss matters of foreign policy with NATO. We know what is happening there in Eastern Europe. So these are critical times. Thanks so much, Santos. I'm sorry.
I got two more examples. You remember Joseph and the Pharaoh?
Oh, yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel.
Yeah.
Now we got Trump and Mike Pence.
No.
See the comparison?
No, you're absolutely right. And you think about it, with Joseph's life, he could have just given up when he was thrown down into that well.
Yeah.
Or when he was in prison.
Or when he was in prison.
When he was in prison.
Now, my wife she goes by the, I'm trying to remember what Rabbi Jonathan Kahn's book, and he says that the Bible character that seems to be a perfect fit for Trump is Jehu, the wild charioteer. And so for those who haven't read, go back into Kings. I don't know if it's 1st or 2nd Kings. I think it's 2nd Kings, and read about it. because my wife's reading this thing and she's going, "Oh my gosh, this guy's kind of crazy."
Well,
and so who knows? But it is amazing how God never seems to use who we think He would use.
That's right.
I mean, look at Moses, right? Look at all these people. God makes them legitimate, He loves to use the one that it's God. And everybody with Trump is like, well, there's no way this guy should have won. There's no way. So God's using him, and we just need to pray. We're told to pray. Whoever the president is, we're to pray for the president, and we did that. I think probably a lot of Point of View listeners prayed for the last few presidents, no matter who. We should continue praying for Trump, and especially, as you mentioned, Alan, these next few days, as he's picking the Supreme Court justice that very well could set our court for the next 30 years.
And remember, Paul points out that God does this oftentimes to confound the wise and those mighty after the flesh.
That's right.
Because they wouldn't expect that, and here comes something you just don't expect.
Well, it is about God getting the glory, not man.
Amen.
That's the very important thing. So, Santos, again, thank you so very much. And I enjoyed being out there in Tombstone, Arizona last week. First time I got to visit Fort Huachuca, and that's the home of the Buffalo Soldiers. So that meant a whole lot to me. So thank you very much, my friend. Hey, let's close and just bring this up real quick. There was an issue with the Pastor Jeffers of First Baptist Church just a couple of weeks ago. You know, they have this patriotic celebration, and this guy Mikey Weinstein of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which is an oxymoronic term, he got the Pentagon to write a letter saying that they could not put up the official military seals of the Army and the Air Force, and the Marines, because that was a violation of the whole separation of church and state thing. You know, these are the type of things that you're fighting for, as well as a lot of our men and women in uniform. And, you know, I just want to say, being a former member of our services, thank you. Thank you for that, because when we take that oath, we're under a different code of justice. And lots of times we don't get to live our lives or say the things that we want to say, but we should not have a government that is seeking to, restrain those things. And I got to tell you, buddy, we're in those interesting times, man.
There we are.
When it comes to our economy and everything that's going on. And who would have ever thought that we could go from where we were? But as we close, what is the golden nugget that we need to do to turn it around as far as our debt and deficit?
Oh, the debt and deficit, we need to grow the economy. You can do a lot if you have a growing economy in terms of paying down the debt or keeping the debt from getting bigger. So a strong economy covers a lot of sins.
There you go. And in closing, for those that want to abolish ICE, illegal immigrants arrested by ICE, 48,000 for assaults in 2017. 5,000 sexual assaults, 2,000 kidnappings, 1,800 homicides, 76,000 major drug crimes, 980,000 pounds of narcotics, 2,370 pounds of fentanyl, almost 7,000 pounds of heroin. Those men and women are keeping us safe. God bless you guys of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and thank you all for listening to us today at Point of View Radio.
Why does Kirby Anderson do what he does? Because he believes in God's ability to use you to make a difference.
There's a real need for us to articulate a responsible biblical perspective and to give people an understanding of what is happening in the world, and in addition to educating them, to then empower them to go out and make a difference for Christ.
Together we can push back the growing darkness. It's not going to be easy. But by God's grace, it is happening, one person, one community at a time. Join us in this mission. Become a monthly partner. $1 a day, $30 a month will make a huge difference. Or perhaps you can do $100 a month. We need partners of all sizes. We need you. Give today online at pointofview.net. At the top of the page, next to the Donate Now button, click on Become a Monthly Partner. Pointofview.net. Mail your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, or call 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because